certainly are lovely. I mean, even sticky from the juice that's leaked out.
And the color. You're getting color on your hand already.
Oh, yeah. Color is fantastic. Hey there, I'm Karl Von Senden, your wine guy for the day. We're up here in beautiful Sonoma County, California, and I'm speaking with John Holdredge, award-winning winemaker for Holdredge Wines. And John, I know we're right in the middle of crush, so I know you're terribly busy, but I have to admit, in the quest for the perfect ripeness, it looks like we're just about there.
Oh, we're all over it right now.
All over it. And I guess, I'm curious, do you prefer to hand-pick your grapes, or do you use a machine?
Karl, I would never use a machine to pick grapes. You only pick by hand. The best fruit is done with hand work, and that includes picking. Earlier in the year, a couple issues with the heat, so there's always a need to go through and be very meticulous and make sure that what you pick is the best fruit possible. And I'll tell you, if it isn't perfect coming out of the vineyard, it's not going to be perfect coming out of the winery.
Right. Well, this does look like it's going to be an extremely good vintage.
Oh, it's going to be a great year.
Right. Let's get on up to the winery.
All righty.
All right, John, we're here at the crusher. Looks like you've got half the family and half of everybody else's family in here just working themselves to death. What's going on?
Well, what we've done is we brought that fruit in, we've put it up on the sorting table. We're doing a final sort to make sure everything is perfect. It comes through the destemmer, and then any other material, little pieces of green, we're pulling stems out of there, and once that's done, we'll put it into the fermenter.
All right.
Because we don't use pumps here, everything's by gravity. To get this fruit up on that sorting table, we're going to lift it up, and we're going to dump it onto the sorting table with the forklift.
At the winery, white grapes go off to be crushed and pressed. Now, they may be chilled first, but the winemaker's main goal is to get the clear, fresh juice flowing from the grapes. Now, red grapes go to the crusher to have their skins broken and stems removed, but they don't go to the press until after fermentation. Thus, the big difference between making white wine and red wine is that the juice is fermented in white without the skins for white wines, whereas for red wine, the juice ferments with the skins. In fact, that's how red wine gets its color. The flesh of almost all red wine grapes is colorless, which is why you can make white wine and rosé out of red grapes.
In here, small pieces of stem can break off. We call them jacks because they look like the jacks that you played with when you were a kid. So we have two people just pulling jacks out of there so that it doesn't get into the wine, because we don't want the flavors of the stems interfering with the wine.
Combine healthy grapes with the natural bloom and the natural yeast populations that build up over time in wine regions, and the result will be wine, if you're lucky. All too often, the result would be more like vinegar than wine, your precious liquid having succumbed to attack from bacteria or unfriendly yeast. Hey, it's a jungle out there. All right, John, so what are you doing now?
Well, I'll tell you, Karl, we are going to put these grapes into a tank to ferment them. We don't use pumps. Everything we do is with gravity, so I'm going to lift them up with a forklift, flip them over on its side, and the grapes will go into this tank.
All right, we got a gift wrap package here, John, so why don't you explain what we're looking at?
Well, this is some Pinot Noir that we just crushed this morning, and this is the fruit. It's cold soaking. Right now, this is about 38 degrees, and it's going to sit here and soak like this for a week before we let fermentation start.
So the container itself is a cold soak container.
This is an old dairy tank built in the 40s. It was used at a dairy for many years. It's very popular amongst Pinot Noir makers because they really hold the cold very well, and we can really extend our cold soaks. I go a minimum 7 days, sometimes up to 10 days cold soaking, and the longer you soak, the more flavor, the more color, the more extraction you get out of it.
And I've noticed you don't break the skin on your Pinots then, do you?
No, we try to get as much whole berry in our wines because what we want is the stuff from the skin, not the stuff from the seed. So we don't like to break it open. We want the tannins, the color, the flavors from the skin. We don't want the harsher phenolics that come out of the seeds.
It's a fact of life that few wines are made without any additives, but it's equally true that most additives are used in tiny amounts and, more importantly, leave no residues in the wine. The most commonly used in very small amounts is sulfur dioxide, which is usually added as an extremely effective disinfectant and preservative when the grapes go into the crusher.
We're on top of a tank of Pinot Noir that's been fermenting, and what happens is as the wine ferments, it creates carbon dioxide, which pushes the skins up to the top of the tank. We call that the cap. So to keep the skins in contact with the wine, we do what's called punching down, and I take this tool and I push down through the skins until the juice comes up. You can see some of that foam. That foam's the CO2. And we do this on each fermentation, depending on what period of time it is in the fermentation, anywhere up from 1 to 4 times a day. And we say it's a lot like painting a bridge. You get to one end, you go back, and you start at the beginning again.
The fluid inside the fermentation vessel is called must. Today, winemakers often use cultured yeast and commercial nutrients to make sure that the fermentation starts quickly.
That's the beginning of a punch down. This wine's been going about a week of fermentation, so it's pretty easy to punch down. But when they're first starting, it's like going through a brick wall. But that's the fun of it. We do it by hand because that's the only way to make good wine.
Olden times, you never saw the tops of the vats covered. It was just left open. So all manner of bird debris, trees, whatever, because the tanks were outside a lot of the time, would go in to that vat.
No fresher than that. It's like
This is the fruit of the gods before the gods even know they've got fruit. Oh, that's fantastic. A little charge.
Oh, yeah. That's going to be a really good wine.
Good stuff.
Yeah.
Okay, John, we've been through fermentation. We're going to go ahead and pull it out of the vat. Must is ready to go. Bring it over here to the press and carry on.
Well, basically what we do is we shovel it out into those bins you've been seeing in there, lift it up with a forklift. Again, we're not using a pump. We have a hopper that comes over the top, and we dump it in with the forklift. It comes into the press. The press has a bladder. It just squeezes very gently. The juice comes out the bottom and goes directly to barrel. When it's done pressing, we just open the door, this rotates and dumps the dried grape skins, and they're like cornflakes. They feel like cornflakes, that consistency, into another one of those bins, and it goes out to the compost pile. Everything gets recycled.
And the fertilizer from this resulting must is just almost a must in itself in the fields. Well, what about the old-time presses?
Well, you know, the really old school is what we call the basket press, and we've got one over here, and I've actually
Take a look at this.
I've actually used this press. It's been a few years since I have. I have a newer one that I use, and every year I do one lot of wine in a basket press just because it kind of gets me back to the way things used to be. This one's just here for looking at this point. It's kind of old and beyond. This was built in about 1930 by the Bianchi Company in San Francisco just after Prohibition.
John, we've gotten through the press. We've returned the grape skins and so forth to the fields. We've poured off the resultant liqueur. It goes into these lovely barrels. I assume you're using French barrels?
100% French oak, most of it from the forest known as Trancé. This one is from Allier Forest, which is a mixture of forests in the center of France, but almost everything we use is Trancé.
Now this is a little special. Generally, you'll find vintners using a combination of American oak and French oak. The French oak, however, imparts a more subtle flavor, which is not to say that American oak barrels aren't good. However, you'll find that they give a more robust flavor. But properly coopered, properly selected, they add an awful lot to a wine. You know, John, after stomping through the fields, after fighting the weather, fighting the freeze, worrying about the rain, it's a long journey. But I would tell you, this is fantastic.
Thank you very much.
John Holdredge, Holdredge Wines, I salute you.
To your good health, my friend.
You know, John, I know that you all give a lot of wine away when you're doing your tastings and so forth. I mean, that must create kind of a crimp in the budget. How do you handle that?
Well, it kind of goes with the territory. You know, people need to taste the wines, and we figure if they taste them, they'll understand them. And if they understand them, they'll become as passionate about them as we are.
I see. Well, boy, I'm glad you said that. How about a case for me? Well, think how good it'll make you feel. Think how good it'll make me feel. What? Well, folks, it's a wrap from Sonoma Valley. I think you can see how hard these people work. and the fact that it isn't just a matter of squeezing some grapes into a bottle. We really have some wonderful wine and some wonderful winemakers in this part of the country. Stick with us because we'll be visiting various other parts of the country, and we'll also be doing an immediate stint on how to taste that lovely wine that we've just prepared. So until next time, I'm your host, Karl Von Senden. Thanks for watching.